Welcome everyone to the Teaching and Learning meeting for Wednesday, April 22nd, 2015. This is Neil Caden, and I'm just going to go over the agenda, and then we'll get started. Notice there's an Etherpad link in the chat. Please sign into the Etherpad when you get a chance. The agenda for today is project updates and announcements. Then the main topic today is Dave Eveland. Is that how you pronounce your name, Eveland?
It's actually Eveland.
Eveland, okay. Dave Eveland will be then presenting on experiences using lessons at Johnson University, and leave plenty of time, I'm sure, for questions. And then we'll discuss and schedule future meeting topics. Although actually it's pretty filled up, but we can review what we've got and maybe have a little discussion around the Open Apereo conference for those of us who are going, and then we'll wrap up. So are there any other agenda items or announcements? There's not a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Jim. I'm going to try to find this link, but one thing I can throw in here and just put out there is there's a demonstration of the Ckeditor, not Kaltura, but Ckeditor, Cattura video platform, specifically about how to use it with Sakai as an LTI compliant tool. That's going to be held at the end of this month. So I'll put the registration link in there for anybody who's interested in seeing how that might work. So it's a kind of an interesting service they provide, and it's a kind of an interesting alternative to something like Kaltura. So I'll put that in.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, please. Okay, good. So yeah, please paste the information directly into the Etherpad.
Sure.
Yeah. I think what I'm just going to go off the top of my head, and any one of the people who are involved in the projects can feel free to interrupt and correct me. The STEP project, I don't think there's anything new to report. We had mentioned that we've engaged with Flying Kite, and they have, they'll be starting work in a little bit, so there's no new information report on that one. Let's see, Lessons Enhancement Project. We are getting an update on status from Unicon, who's doing the development on that. Express Labs did the wireframes, and so we should have an update on that probably next week. Sakai, let's see, what else? Morpheus, there's a presentation on Morpheus, and there's a presentation on LEAP, so we should probably paste those as well in there. There's a presentation on the Lessons Enhancement Project next week, and there's also a presentation on Morpheus and kind of the state of Morpheus, which is responsive design for Sakai. So that'll be next week as well. There's some testing going on, some QA testing going on right now. The purpose of that is we already know there's a lot of additional changes coming to Sakai even from this point, but there already have been a lot of changes. So we're trying to just sort of get a little bit more of a baseline and as much as possible test in lessons, Samigo test and quizzes, assignments, and gradebook. And then we'll have to do, another round of testing after Morpheus gets more developed and refined, and also there's infrastructure changes that are happening in Sakai. We're upgrading to Java 8. I think there was some changes in caching, and various other infrastructure changes that are happening right now, that are happening in Trunk. But we have a Marist QA server that we're holding steady. The gradebook, I haven't heard any new news from the gradebooks. I assume that's still on track. And I don't, Jim, I don't know if you have any other information on that project.
Not at this point, I don't, Neil.
Okay.
But if you'd like, I think one thing I could do is just I can get in touch with Jeff and Kyle, and maybe it might be see where we are with it, and have some kind of an update for next week. So I can do that.
Okay, that'd be cool. Because if you do that, then we'll have between the webinars and the teaching and learning sessions, then we'll have updates on practically everything. So that sounds good. Sakai 11, we have a tentative schedule. I think I mentioned last time. Basically, we are going to nail down scope around the Apereo conference. So in the Apereo conference, we should have a really good idea of the ongoing schedule, because we'll know exactly what's going in. We have a very good idea already, but we'll have it more in depth. And I expect that Sakai 11 would be released either fourth quarter of this year, or possibly first quarter of 2016 is what I'm guessing based on how things are shaking out. So any other questions or enhancements to what I've just said about the different projects? Yeah, I don't see any questions on Big Blue Button or on the Etherpad. Are there any other announcements? Okay. All right, then I will cede the floor over to Dave Eveland. So Dave, you can take it away and present your experiences with lessons.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. Thanks to the Teaching and Learning group for an opportunity to kind of share what some of the experiences are that we've had at Johnson University. We're going to try and see if we can just I tried in the slide deck to share a lot of picture content, mostly because the screen sharing, while it's convenient, sometimes doesn't always work for everyone. And we can do screen sharing later if we feel like we want to explore that. But just to kind of give you a little bit of overview, Johnson University is located in Knoxville, Tennessee, and in Florida. We were established in 1893 as Johnson Bible College, and we changed our name in 2011, and we're recognized by Best Colleges in 2015 as a Best Top Online Bible College. We actually have our Sakai instance as part of the LAMP consortium, which you can find more information about at lampschools.org. And it's basically a lot of small schools and institutions or organizations that have come together to have Longsight host our instance of Sakai. So we sort of cost leverage share an instance of Sakai. So I kind of want to step back and look at this from the concept and the context of modules. I want to say most people remember, if you've been around using Sakai for any length of time, you remember modules. And in some cases, there are probably some institutions that are still using modules. And modules are not evil, but I want to say most of us, if you've used modules before or dealt with faculty or course designers that have used modules before, modules worked for some sort of mechanism of getting content together. But it definitely had some issues. It was kind of clunky to use, I felt like. It was awkward in terms of the authoring, and it really used its own resources area. So it made it difficult to use the resources inside of Sakai because you couldn't put things there and then really easily get them so they were functionally accessible inside the modules tool. Some of the way that modules looked from a long time ago, and this kind of is meant to give us perspective on what we have inside of lessons now. Inside of lessons now, we have some other sort of structure, but this is the way modules used to look, where you could create individual lessons and unit content, and you had open and due and allow dates, that sort of thing. There was a view, and there was an author view, so you could author content. And for the most part, it just simply provided a mechanism for students and users to access really files to download. At least in my experience it was. So it was really kind of kludgy and not really easy to use. So skip forward 2 years, and that's, I don't know exactly when we made the switch from modules to Lesson Builder. I can't remember the date. But thanks to our good friends over at Rutgers, they actually, as far as I recall, were a big proponent for being able to put together Lesson Builder, which is what we call Lessons now. And so we realized that content, the Lesson Builder, worked really, really well with the resources area of site content inside of Sakai. And it was also great because Lessons provided direct links to assignments and topics and all those other things that we wanted to be able to give students direct access to. In most cases, when we were dealing with modules, when we designed courses, especially our online courses, but all of our courses, we always had to tell students on the left-hand side, click on such and such, and then go to such and such inside the course. And so Lesson Builder really brought forward this concept and this benefit of being able to provide direct linking to content so that students could get to it. So it was a really big win for us. And we had not quite started building a lot with modules, but we saw the win in Lesson Builder, and so we quickly started migrating and building all of our stuff in Lesson Builder, which is now Lessons, of course. So let me give you some perspective then. I'm going to show you a couple slides that have to do with how we've actually progressively built out course content using lessons, not using modules. And so what I have here, you can see there's a course that we've actually built out that actually is from a couple of years ago when Lessons first came out. When Lessons first came out for us, we were using the Ckeditor. We now use the Ckeditor, which is that text box sort of editing window I think that everybody might be familiar with. But when course designers and our faculty first started designing with Lessons, they mostly used just one Lessons area. If you can see here, I'll zoom in a little bit. On the left-hand side here, they would build out the course content, and this edit button here is indicative of a single text area. So a lot of our faculty would simply create a single text area and dump a lot of their content right into that single text area. It wasn't too bad of a thing, but then they would start putting image content in, and that was okay, but it meant that the course content ended up being really, really long in terms of the pages. Some of our faculty were aware of the subpage function inside of Lesson Builder, and so some of them started to use sort of that content and that function anyways. We stepped forward in the same exact course, roughly about a year or 2 years, and more of our faculty and our course designers started going through and using the lessons function with several different text areas. Here you can see they actually started using that reorder function that's inside of Lessons or Lesson Builder. Still kept the same sort of functional layout and that sort of thing, but they were using more text areas to try and build out their content. And we also sort of got to a place where more of them were making sure they were building out content so that they had direct access to things like assignments and forum topics and assessments. We'll step forward 1 or 2 more semesters, and some of our faculty really started trying to get to a place where they wanted to make things look prettier, in a sense. And so a lot of our faculty started messing around with some of the HTML content and div statements. Here you can see this is the exact same course. So if I go back, you can see this is the course as it was then, and this is the course as it stands now. And so faculty were going through and course designers are going through and trying to really use some div statement content to visually set content off and aside so that as students go through the content, they were more familiar with it. They understood where they were on the page. They didn't feel like they got lost in a bunch of text. They were better able to use the image content and shove it to the right. A lot of our faculty didn't know that you could right justify an image. And so that was something we had to definitely kind of teach them and help them understand. So this is the way that course looks now, and that's just using a simple div statement to kind of build out that content. In this particular year, I think it's been a year now that we actually have been using the Ckeditor. I know Terry Golightly is also on the session, and she's familiar with our version of Sakai, the Sakai instance we use. And so we've been using the Ckeditor and love it, and it's part of that Lesson Builder experience. And one of the things that we've also run into, and this is just kind of an overview, so you can kind of see how the course evolved over time. You can see that we had lots of content here, a lot of it, of course, developers using clip art images, which is fine, but making better use of it over here to the right so the course content sort of fills up the page in a much more visually aesthetic way. But one of the things we ran into as we continued to use Lesson Builder and Lessons later was this idea about how to build out content onto a course, especially over units or over weeks or however a course would actually be organized. And so what ended up happening in many cases is we have courses that are developed in such a way that unit content or weekly content builds out over this long, long session or this long, long page. And so we've had this sort of internal discussion about, well, how do you build out the courses? Do you build them out with a long page structure? Or do we go through and start using some of the subpage functionality, which the great thing about the subpage functionality, it provides those opportunities for this kind of adaptive release mechanism. And in fact, some of our faculty have used this area here inside of the subpage function, and you can do this at the main page area level too, so where you can create a gradebook entry when the page is completed. Now, I'd like to think that some of the wording here should actually be somewhat changed. The word, it actually sort of indicates, it doesn't really indicate that the page has been completed as much as it means that the page has been visited by a student. But it's a neat way to go through and track whether or not students, especially online students, have actually even gotten to that content or that page. And so there's this good discussion internally about whether or not we build out content on a long page or whether we build out several pages that have several nested, perhaps, subpages for access to content. Any questions about that so far? Or I don't want to go too far. Yep. Okay. So the other thing we run into with using lessons, which we loved, and we've really tried to make use of this, although we need to try and make use of it some more. And this actually comes by way of some of our instructional design staff taking some Quality Matters course instruction. So Quality Matters, one of the things they try and let people know is help students understand that they get the content, especially for online. And so we started using the question function. There's a question function inside of lessons. It's not a poll and it's not an assessment, but it's called question, or at least for us it is. And so we provide these sort of self-checks. So when students go through some content, especially in our online courses, they would go through some online content here, whether it's a video or doing some reading, and prior to being able to go on to the next thing, they would be asked sort of this self-check question. The self-check questions can actually be assessed for correctness if we wanted to. That's part of the way the questions function works. It is limited, but it provided this mechanism of being able to say, hey, student, why don't you check yourself to see if you know the content or not? And in this case, this particular question doesn't necessarily tell the student, it tells the student what the correct answer is, and if they chose the wrong answer, it says, good try, but you might want to look this up in the book, that sort of response. So that it helps them know, do I really know the information at this point or not? And so we really tried to sort of tell our faculty, especially our online faculty, to try and make use of that self-check or that question function inside of lessons. We've also toyed with the idea, and I'm really glad that Christy, you're going to be doing something, I guess next week, about doing some online hybrid course template stuff for faculty. We've really toyed with that idea too. The difficulty is we're not really sure how to do it so well. We've tried to go through and create a template to encourage the use of lessons with this hope and idea that folks would basically be able to have their content for their course and just plug it in so that the visual content sort of has some uniformity, some continuity across courses, schools, and programs, and so that they can actually go through and see that in terms of what it looks like. I think we discussed a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, about this idea about how we could access templates in the Ckeditor. It's a big question for us because I think in some ways, there could be some ways that we could really lend our course designers, our faculty, a big hand if we could give them access to some good content templates. Now, in looking at some of the content templates in use of the Ckeditor, the Ckeditor actually specifies over at cksource.com that developers should most definitely modify the default templates as they are not particularly useful to end users. I found this interesting when just simply doing some research after last week's or the week before session, because I thought, wow, it'd be really nice if we could just simply leverage the content templates in the Ckeditor so that faculty and course designers could use those, much the same way that maybe they do with Microsoft Word templates or PowerPoint templates, but to a lesser design, but inside of Sakai. And so we haven't quite figured out how to get access to those content templates. And because we share, because Johnson University shares an instance of Sakai, I'm not exactly sure how that falls within the context of our instance, because I I would expect that those content templates would be shared across our instance. But those are still questions that we have, and perhaps other institutions have tried to attack and figure out where exactly those things can be accessed and how you can customize those. Other things we've had faculty do is repurpose lessons, and this kind of hits on, I think, what Louisa mentioned last week, is kind of using lessons as a course hub, this idea. We had a faculty member that mentioned to me that they went through and they have a particular course wherein they have quiz content that students access every single week or every single class session. And the way this course designer actually set his course up was he decided, I really want the students to be able to take those quizzes as often as they want to, because it comes from a pool of questions. So this faculty member had, I think, 12 different chapters from a course text, and he had 30 or 40 questions per chapter, and each student would be able to access 5 or 10 questions, and they're all pulled on a random draw. And so his context was, I don't necessarily care if they are able to take the quizzes several times. What I want them to be able to do is I want them to get exposure to the content. And so if that means that they get to take the quizzes several times, then that's fine. In fact, he's even left these quizzes open for the entire period of the course as it evolves, all the way up almost to the last day of the class, telling the students and publishing in the syllabus that you can always improve your grade by going and taking the quizzes. The quizzes are set up, he told me this, he said the quizzes are set up in such a way that it always keeps your last score, not your best score. And I thought, well, that's kind of evil. He said, yeah, but the good thing is because it's doing a random draw of questions, I'm getting the chance for them to have exposure to the content, which is what he wants anyways. And in many cases, students are just looking up the questions in the textbook anyways and just typing them or selecting them. And I said, well, that's kind of evil, but I guess it gets at your objective. Anyways, it was kind of interesting, but he's using lessons here. Instead of actually throwing them over to test and quizzes, he just simply created entries here with a specific quiz lesson area that actually just simply gathers all those lessons or those quizzes together, and they're available for students to take. And it's great because he said you can always improve your grade, unless of course they get 10s or whatever the highest score is. So that's just one other way that some people are using lessons here at Johnson University. Other things that folks have done, they've tried to use the comment function, and I'm not sure how familiar folks are. I don't think the comment function inside of the lessons area is a full-on replacement for forums, nor do I think it's ever meant to be. I think forums handle some really interesting things, especially with the new badging that's in forums. But one of the things, this is an example of another faculty member who's gone through and used the inline. I would kind of call the comment function as an inline comment function, where students are basically being asked, specifically on an online course, to go through and share. Define what you think educational technology is. And so these students then are sharing that content. And if you're not familiar with how that the comment function works, the comment function has an ability for you as an instructor or the administrator of the course to go through and remove that content or to edit their content. And in fact, anybody else in the course can also use the green button to reply to that content. It's really, really kind of an interesting, handy feature. It could make the lessons page pretty long. But there's also a function inside of the edit comments function or that function inside of lessons to grade those. And so you could potentially provide a point valuation for those. And so I have some faculty that are going through and saying, well, should I use this or should I use the forums topic area? And it sort of depends upon what they're trying to accomplish. Just a neat, different way that some faculty are trying to use some of the content inside of lessons or some of the functionality inside of lessons. Another way that some folks have tried to use it is with the student content function, where students have the ability to make their own page content inside of lessons. This can be especially helpful for online courses. And so this is where students can actually create their own content pages. They get limited access so far as what they can actually put on the page. But these are all the different permissions and different things you can set when you go through and you actually choose to do stuff with student content pages. In this particular course, this is a senior level course where students, it's going to create gradebook entries for these student pages. And it's group aware, so there's a place down here where it says to, I can't remember, something about associate the pages with groups instead of with individuals. There's a rubric that you can also attach to these pages, which you can design your own rubric. There's a default rubric in there somewhere, but you can also design your own rubric. Here you can see that there's one. You can set availability dates. These are the groups that rubric and those pages are accessible for, and whether or not it's required. So just some interesting ways that faculty are trying to make use of that student content area. I will say, with regard to using the rubric function in the student content content function, the rubric data is sort of confusing when using it with groups. This particular course asked groups of students to create a presentation and then have everybody else in the course actually provide feedback via the rubric that the instructor designed to provide some feedback on how well that presentation was organized. And so the content, here's the rubric that students were asked to use. So this is the one that the instructor came up with. Judge the presentation on layout, content, effectiveness, graphics, that sort of thing. And then the problem was, this is what the content looks like in terms of feedback, the peer evaluation stats. The information here you see inside the rubric. I guess this is the results from the rubric. So you have here this particular group, because each of the groups group pages were made by a particular individual. These groups here, this one that says Peggy, this one says Angela, and there's some other ones. These actually represent the groups, not those individuals. And so, interestingly, while using the student content function with groups, these peer evaluation stats actually reflect names of individuals who made those student pages rather than the names of those groups. But then when students actually provided that feedback, it's all collected here in the peer evaluation stats, which the instructor can see. And then here what you can basically see is that there are 10 individuals that rated the layout for Peggy's group presentation as a 4. And if you click on any of these numbers, then it indicates which of those students actually indicated that particular level. And so I had an instructor come back to me and ask, well, what do I do with this? And I told him, I'm not sure yet. I'm still trying to explore that a little bit, and if anybody has some other strategic, awesome ideas about how to kind of make that work and give feedback to that instructor, that would be great. Or if anybody's got experience with that, that would be great. So let's have 2 more slides to share to kind of go over some of the experiences we've had. And then I think at some level we'll have a chance to kind of look at some of the questions. I know there's some chat going on in the chat area, and I haven't really paid attention much to that. I apologize, but we will get to that here quickly. So other things we've had some folks do, this is the last thing. We've had some folks play with jQuery. jQuery might sound like some crazy language, but jQuery is out there, and I think, if I remember right, I'm not a technology coding person, but I've had a couple of faculty mess around with jQuery. And jQuery provides this operationalized, I guess, coding language that allows you to do some things within the context, potentially not specifically of Sakai or lessons, but it's a development coding platform. And so we had an instructor that was going through and had some questions about, I need students to be able to draw some tree diagrams. They need to do some diagramming of sentences, and I need to see if they're doing it right. And I said, well, why don't you just draw a bunch of diagrammed sentences, some of them that are wrong, some of them that are right, and then just do multiple choice. And she told me, no. So I said, well, let's see if we can figure something out. So she found an opportunity to be able to use something that's called jQuery, and she asked, is there some way we could try and make this work? So the way that this worked is the jQuery code is actually dumped into the resources area, and there's an index.html file that we were actually able to throw right into an iframe into the lessons area. And so students were actually able to go through and chart this. They were actually able to draw the diagram here. Now the only drawback here is this save your drawing area on the very bottom. The Save Your Drawing area here essentially takes the content there that you see in the diagram and opens that content up as a PNG file on a new tab, which students can then right-click, save, download, and then below this area, they can actually submit through an assignment, file upload, that sort of thing. Essentially, though, it got at what she wanted to accomplish. It's not as slick, but it works well enough that she deemed it acceptable. So that's pretty much all that I have to share. There's lots of other things I could share in the sense of screen sharing and looking at our course sites, but that's pretty much what we've been able to sort of accomplish. We have two full-time faculty that are on the instructional design team here at Johnson University, supporting over 200 faculty and roughly 2,200 students online in our two campuses. And so we have limited resources, which I'm sure everybody else does. So, any questions?
Hi, this is Marilyn. Great talk, Dave, on lessons, because I think you articulated a lot of the things that I see, with our users, with subpages versus putting everything in one box, and what's the best design. One thing I'd like to add is I tell people, I'm the kind of person that when I design, I like to just start putting things in place and then I move things around later. I think moving things around in lessons is really a pain, because you can't just say, I have this thing, I want to move it. You have to go to where you are and then add items from another page. It's very convoluted. So I think that, and then on top of the fact that the index, I would love to see a hierarchical index that you could sort of see from any page, and then you could go into an edit mode, kind of like Google Sites. And if you want to sort of start changing hierarchies, you can move things around and decide, no, I'd rather break this up in a different way. So saying both those things means I start to have a reluctance of how much time does someone want to have in taking all their content and picking in the system and building this extensive, multi-tiered, multi-page document, when then if they change their minds or they reorder their course, it's such a pain.
Right. Yeah, that's we've had that issue too, because some faculty who have inherited courses from others, especially online courses, have asked, well, I really want to kind of do this slightly differently. Is that okay? And for us, it's yes, that's okay, but it also means you're going to maybe need to reorganize some of that content. And if there are multiple subpages, that is super, super, super difficult to do. On the one end, the long pages might be a little bit easier to organize in the sense of sequence of pages or order on the page. But then the subpages provide you that mechanism of adaptive release and being able to check to see if students have actually gotten to that page yet. So you're asking a really, really good question, and I wish we knew how to answer that, and we haven't figured that out either.
Okay, thanks.
This oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Louisa.
Hi, this is Louisa. I have a lot of questions. So a couple of main questions here. First, we are transitioning from lessons, the Meleti to lessons. We have so many courses in our Sakai instance, so we don't want to manually help the instructor to convert. So I'm just wondering, when you transition from Meleti to modules to lessons, how did you help the faculty to migrate all the content? Right now, we're looking to the import and export function, but it was not that good. Just wondering if you have any advice on that. And also the templates, I see that you click on the button template in the Sakai editor. I click on the template in our instance. These are very simple templates there. Yours looks more sophisticated. So I'm just wondering if you guys made some modification to that template button, or how did you deliver the template to the courses? Great
questions, Louisa. Let me start with your first question. When we migrated from the Meleti tool or modules into lessons, we had not invested a ton into the modules tool. When we were new to using Sakai, and not many of our faculty were into the idea of understanding how to organize content. It was mostly like, I need some place to put my grades in my syllabus. Even though we've been using Blackboard since 2001, many years ago. So we've been using Sakai since 2009. But what we ended up doing was we ended up telling faculty the Meleti tool for us. This is how we declared it. We said the Meleti tool, the modules tool, is going to go away. It's going to we told them it's at the end of the line. And a lot of our faculty got super scared about that. We said it doesn't mean your content's going to disappear, but there's no current development on it, or at least that was what we communicated to them. And we said, we're going to help you with your content as far as building your content out in lessons. Now, in most cases, that left a lot of our courses in a place where if faculty had developed content in modules or in the Melite tool, then they simply relegated to putting content into resources in the course, because a lot of them had done that already. A lot of them were curious about the fact that, why am I putting course content in inside of resources, and then when I go to use the Melite tool, I can't get to it? And so a lot of them had already had content there in the first place. So it was a win for us to be able to tell them, in the Lesson Builder tool, you can actually get to that content and direct students to it, rather than telling students, go to the resources from Melite, and so that was a win. But the other thing we told them, we provided some lightweight training to them over the course of a couple of weeks over the summer and into the next year. And then from there on, we haven't done much aside from providing standard faculty sort of training periodically throughout the year, especially for new faculty and adjuncts. We do actually have I know of at least a single course that is still using the Melite tool, because it was an early course build, and none of the individual schools has wanted to pony up the cash to just simply pay to have it redeveloped using the Lessons tool. Because we basically told everybody, we're not providing any more support for the Melite tool anymore. But that's been easily 2 years ago, I would say. So your second question, as far as the Ckeditor, so those content templates in there that you see, those are actually coming from the Ckeditor as our host has actually put in the Ckeditor. So the Ckeditor we're using, if I'm correct on this, we should be using the Ckeditor 3.4. Now, Ckeditor is actually up, I think, till version 4, maybe 5. And I don't know what the various different flavors are in that regard. But those are the templates that we see, and we as a consortium, at least we as Johnson University, have not touched those templates. I want to, and I want to try and kind of come up with some other ideas about how we can put some other templates in there, so it might make it easier for faculty or course designers to design their content. But we haven't really done a good job investigating how to do that. But we know and it may be particular because we're in an instance, so we share those content templates. So if we have a content template we want to have with Johnson University branding on it, that may not work so well. But we might have to have something much more generic. Good question.
But Dave, this is Terry at KCU. I don't see that in the LAMP instance. I don't see those templates.
Really?
No, I've never seen that.
Just this morning. I just got that screenshot this morning. Terry Golightly is from KCU in Kentucky, and she's one of the institutions we share our instance with. And so ostensibly what she sees is what I should see, at least specific to our institutions. I can't see her courses. She can't see mine. But the Ckeditor is the same in the instance, and I don't know, Terry.
Is that a template button there in the bar?
Yeah, that's actually a template. Yeah, if I go ahead and zoom in there, there's actually a template button there. It's next to the embiggen button for the Ckeditor. It's right next to it's right next to that symbol button that you can use.
Okay.
And when I click on it, I never use them because I think they're sort of archaic, and I'm pretty good at doing some other things without that. But I'd like to get to the place where those templates are far more manageable and easier to use, especially because the Ckeditor folks say, develop your own, come up with something else. Any other questions?
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, you can ask all the questions you want.
Yes. So on another of your slides, you have the templates on the page. So you're saying something like, if you want to remove it, yes, that one. So example unit. So is that something you put in the course template? So when they create a new course, this is the thing they see?
Right. So what we tried to do, and this is not necessarily fully scalable, and we'd like to try and talk to our hosts about trying to do this. So I think most folks are familiar with the idea that you can go through and have your student information system or your central system go through and somehow communicate to Sakai and create your course sites and assign your instructors, enroll your students. One of the things we would like to be able to do is have our course template be able to include what's called this example unit. It's just a lessons area. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that mechanism of auto-creating courses, populating it with faculty and the students, doesn't pick up this content. All it does for us at this point, it just simply picks up the tool assignments for us. And for us, that's sort of a limitation. So what we do and we only do this for our online courses. We have a doctoral program. We have we have several bachelor's programs that are online. And so what we do then for only our online courses, not our on-ground courses, our online courses, we go through and we use this template and replicate this template for a course build, for an initial course build. And from that point on then, they all have this example unit that's hidden. So faculty can look at that, refer to that content, and then they can see sort of, okay, so your help about how to use lessons is in lessons. Now I know when you add a lessons tool on the left-hand side, there's some really great help that's also there. But we've also tried to provide some of this lesson content and help here that's specific to how we want things to look inside and for Johnson University as a brand.
Do you create the courses for the online courses? Do you create the sites for the online courses?
Yes, we initially create all the courses for the online courses. Yeah. And then after that process, now we don't do the whole development process. Our course designers, who normally are faculty, we work with them to develop and build the course, and it's their responsibility to make sure that the course fully gets built out, and we're here as a support mechanism. And so we give them a course shell, just like what you see here, and assist them typically with the first unit or the first chunk of content that they want to build out for their course. And then from that point on, we basically kind of turn them out on their own with support, letting them know you can duplicate your first unit, so it's going to have the same continuity and consistency of layout. We don't work really well with subpages a lot because it doesn't lend itself that well to duplication, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, the instructors in my college create the sites themselves, so we cannot put the example unit page in their course site when they create it. So we have to figure something out. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is, excuse me, this is Jim Mezzanotte. I'm just going to have one comment too, and this is just a question that came up a couple of days ago from somebody using lessons. I noticed that, at one point, I really like this idea of like using some assessments from tests and quizzes more, it seems like more as a kind of a formative tool, right? And more as kind of like a study guide almost in a way. If that makes sense. Yeah, those right there. And I think one of the things we all agree is I see we can wrap up. All right, I'll be real quick here. One of the things that we can all agree is one limitation right now, unfortunately, when you embed test and quiz links inside of a lesson builder page is that you can't, if you're going to give students feedback after they have submitted an assessment, then you have to expose the tool to the students, right, in the tool set, because you can't get to that landing page to get that information. Right. But one thing that I was just explaining to someone how to do, actually yesterday, I'm saying it's a couple of days ago, yesterday, in which I mean, this has always been the case, but I think now it becomes even better for Lesson Builder, is the idea of using immediate feedback on either the question level or selection level for students, and how that could really lend itself to kind of reimagining how you might use tests and quizzes as a formative tool and really integrate it with your lesson builder pages, because in that case, you don't need that landing page, because in that case, right when a student is taking that assessment, you can just click, show feedback, and you can get that feedback right then and there. And, obviously it's like, you wouldn't want to, if you're going to be giving away answers, it's a whole different thing and it's more formative. But it did occur to me when I was thinking about how explaining this, I thought, this is a whole other avenue that you could really start to creatively include with maybe some very short little assessments that can, follow a video or precede a video, where you can kind of, put that feedback into a nice way to do that, where they can select different things and then get different pieces of information. But yeah, anyway, just something to think about.
Yeah, and Jim, that's also true with the assignments tool. We found if faculty are actually going through and providing feedback to students on the assignments that they've turned in, then in similar fashion, they have to allow access to the assignments on the left, and that makes sense, and I get it. But yeah, that's very true, and I'll have to try and play with that. That's a great idea. Well, I guess if there aren't any other questions, Neil?
Okay, thanks. That was a great discussion, and thank you very much, Dave, for leading that. So yeah, for the final part of the meeting, what we're going to do is look forward at the upcoming schedule. And actually, currently we are filled up for until Open Apereo, and I'm not sure if it makes sense to schedule any teaching and learning or not. I'm wondering if it makes sense to schedule any specific topics, because maybe specific topics will come out of discussions at Open Apereo, so I'm curious about that. On the other hand, we already have a topic that's come up, and so we could schedule that, which is the idea of making a community effort out of creating templates for the Ckeditor. I've got that right. Is that right?
I think that actually has merit regardless of what comes out of the Apereo conference, because I don't know that the Ckeditor is going to go away anytime soon for most everybody that's using it. So coming up with an opportunity for folks to kind of contribute to creating template content might be really, really beneficial.
Cool. So would folks like to make that part of the teaching and learning meeting, having a discussion on the call, or as a separate meeting outside the call? Is there enough interest to have it on the call, you think? I mean, it sounds like there is, because I'm hearing like 3 or 4 voices, and I'm seeing yeses in there. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we can make that meeting part of a call, and let's look at the schedule. What's the first meeting after the teaching and learning? After the Open Apereo conference. Let's see, that would be Wednesday, June 10th. So let's make June 10th. Down here. Sorry for the messiness of the notes here. So June 10th, we'll do template, template creation for Ckeditor. And does anyone want to volunteer to lead that discussion?
Do we have anybody who's good with templates? I'm not that person, but I'm hoping that maybe somebody is.
That's a really good question. Is sort of who is experienced at doing templates or knows how to do template creation, because probably a good way to start that discussion is to demonstrate kind of how template creation is done, and maybe 1 or 2 examples of templates, and that I think would be a really good way to kind of launch it.
And we've got nominate Christy, but I just don't know what Miss Manners would say about nominating somebody after they've. I think she already left the call though, right? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we can do that. I don't think Christy's with us right now.
The call, so it's fair game.
Okay, all right then.
I just think we need to reach out to her, and I can shoot her an email if I can find her email address, and or if somebody happens to know it, and then ask her if she'd be willing to do that.
And the other thing I would throw out there, it just occurred to me too, which might make this even more useful for more people, is it just occurred to me that we've been thinking about templates just in terms of how they might apply in Lesson Builder, but I could easily see like, are there a couple of templates that might be particularly good for creating questions in tests and quizzes, or instructions for assignments, or the other places that you use the Ckeditor? There might be some particular, we have to get really crazy about it, but there might be some particular things that people might say, well, we've seen, usually when we create a quiz or an assignment or whatever, that we're using the editor, that we want to see X, Y, and Z when we do those instructions. So it'd be good to just have it mapped out ahead of time. So just something else to think about. Exactly. Ckeditor templates for specific tools. Yeah, like it.
Cool. I'll make a note of that in the notes here for specific tools. So yeah, I'll reach out to Christy, because I do think that's a good point, Jim. I think that would be important to to kick off the discussion. So tentatively, we'll make that for June 10th, and tentatively, we'll say Christy's leading it, but we'll double check on those things. And I do see the question about LTI. Yeah, I have reached out to Dr. Chuck Severance, and he has expressed, enthusiasm about presenting to the group. I guess he just had, I don't know if you are aware of I follow him in different ways, like on lists and Twitter and so forth, and he's just super busy. So I suspect that's the holdup. I ping him about once a week to ask him to remind him, or once every other week to remind him about that. So I'll ping him again. I know he's excited to present to this group. It's just probably finding time, because he does MOOC. He's a instructor at University of Michigan. He does MOOCs. He does Sakai development. He keynotes on different conferences all the time. So just a very, very busy individual.
Hey, Neil.
Yeah.
Could I just, I'll add this too. I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I had kind of an evil plan for this, and I was going to ask you about, but I'll just mention it here as well. I put that thing in there about the Ckeditor video platform, and one of the things that you can't do with that is embed. And I think they need like some kind of an LTI content plugin that I know that Dr. Chuck and others have been talking about doing for the Ckeditor. So I'm just going to throw that in there. We can talk about this offline, but just as something else to maybe put into the mix, that, if we could have Dr. Chuck come and talk to us, maybe we can also get some momentum behind that plugin, because I know it's been on the roadmap for Dr. Chuck and for others for a while. There's just not much bandwidth for it, but I'm hoping that with these kind of cool things like Ckeditor and other things that would really benefit from that maybe we can talk about that at some point too.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the things that Dr. Chuck had mentioned to me, which I was excited about, is he noticed a discussion we've been having on the replacement wiki in Sakai and the XWiki, which XWiki is a really robust open source wiki tool, and it has its own community, and it seems very mature, and it has LTI integration. But if we want to make it work well with Sakai, we might want to extend that integration and make it more robust. And and Dr. Chuck indicated that he might be interested in pursuing that, and exploring that. And so I was pretty excited about that, and I was kind of hoping that if he came on, we could ask him those kinds of questions and see what his thinking is and what his kind of timeline is roughly on these kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think that's great. Because like one of the things I don't know the technical details of this, but it looks to me like this plugin that we need, this LTI content plugin, that we kind of like might want to line up some of the potentially really neat things that could be potentially pulled into the editor if we had that. And I think that the XWiki and this other platform could be two of them. There's probably others, so that would be something to also just kind of have Dr. Chuck explain how all that might work. That might really help get momentum in the community, so they can say, oh, okay, that's what that means. That's what we can do if we get this done.
Yeah. So cool. Well, I'll reach out to him again. I'll just keep doing that, or we can grab him, worst case scenario, we could probably grab him at the Open Apereo conference, or maybe we can even, lasso him and pull him into one of the teaching and learning BOFs, and get him to talk there and get that kicked off, because I think there could be really interesting discussions.
I'd go to that in a heartbeat. So
yeah. Maybe I'll ping him also and ask him what his plans are. He's going to be at Open Apereo. He's going to be presenting. He's the Sakai PMC chair also, so he'll be involved in that. Hopefully, he'll have some free cycles for some of these other kinds of discussions as well. We only got about 5 minutes, but that's good. We got a couple of new ideas for sessions, and I wanted to mention, let's see, so what we got coming up is next week we have Christy presenting on how Rutgers uses lessons to structure hybrid courses. I'm scheduled for JIRA, so what I thought I would do there is kind of remind people. I know JIRA is kind of intimidating for most of the community. I think developers and those of us who are in it a lot, we get used to it and it's not such a big deal, but I know it's a pretty intimidating tool. But I'll show you how you can easily kind of flag something if you want the teaching and learning group to look at it. And probably on a regular basis, maybe once every few months, it might be worth, and this could be the one time we do this, is kind of go through the existing issues that are tagged, kind of talk about them and think about, what kind of teaching and learning perspective we want to put into whether it's a bug or a feature that's being developed. May 13th is peer review and lessons, FAWE. May 20th is lesson survey results, Louisa Lee. May 27th is Ckeditor's coming back again, this time kind of like what we're talking about almost for the Ckeditor, we're talking about making a community effort. That session is like a community effort for us to brainstorm different use cases for the Ckeditor portfolio tool, which is, an Apereo level project. And so that could be really interesting. I'm wondering if we need to do some things to prepare in advance for that. So I may ask Janice what her suggestions are. And then, of course, we have Open Apereo, which I'm sure not everybody can go to, but hopefully a number of us will be there. And the items that, and the schedule should be published really soon. It's really pretty much ready to go in terms of the schedule. I think I'm suspecting it's a technical issue because they're trying to load all the data up into Lanyard, which is the tool of choice we've used for the last few years in Apereo, because that makes it really easy to look up your schedule, to sign up for lanyard.com, and to use it on mobile, and to click on the things that you want to attend so you can keep track of your schedule. So really nice tool, but that may be the holdup for why that's not published. I'm really, really hoping and thinking that the schedule for Open Apereo will be published this week, and then we can have more discussion and look for more threads that might be of interest to the Teaching and Learning group. As it is, Jim is doing a presentation on conditional release and lessons. There's going to be a Teaching and Learning Birds of a Feather. That'll be led by Josh Barron. There's an Apereo Teaching and Learning BOF. So we're kind of taking one of those Teaching and Learning BOFs and focusing it specifically on, do we want to expand into Apereo? Make this meeting more of an Apereo level discussion, or do we want to keep it separate? Or what about the Teaching with Sakai Innovation Award? Should it be Teaching with Apereo products? So that should be really interesting. Lessons BOF, I think there's always a lot of discussion around lessons and sharing best practices, so we could continue the discussion there. Samigo, Birds of a Feather, which every year seems to get a really good turnout. Turnitin BOF, so there's been a lot of discussion around the Turnitin plugin for Sakai, and Adam Marshall's leading that from Oxford. Ckeditor has a pre-conference workshop, so you might want to, if you're interested in the Ckeditor portfolio system, you might want to consider looking into that. We've got, I guess there's a Birds of a Feather for portfolios as well, so that'll be a nice follow-up. Crowdsourcing uses of lessons. There's going to be, of course, presentations on all the new features. There'll be presentations in Sky 11. There'll be presentations on Samigo, test and quizzes, and the STEP project, which came out of the Sakai Virtual Conference, the new gradebook, the Lessons Enhancement Project, separate presentations by TWSBI Award winners. So there's a ton of content, and just Sakai related. And of course, there might be some things also Apereo level related that would be of interest. And there's a ton of collaboration opportunities as well. I think it's been mentioned, like we're going to have a networking. I noticed it's 11, so I need to really wrap up here. But I'll just say, like, there's a networking lunch on Monday where we're in about a week or two, we're going to launch some community voting where you can kind of just suggest topics that you want to talk about, and then we'll have votes on those. And so the top vote getters will get into the networking lunch. So it'll be lunchtime. If you want to participate, you can go at a table and kind of like a BOF. Then there's a networking lounge where we will have opportunities for subject matter experts, maybe people who are doing presentations, or people who their items didn't get in networking lunch, but still there's energy and interest around it. So there's another opportunity still. Those items of interest don't have to drop off the face of the earth. People, it's like an ad hoc space. There'll be a nice large room that has 3 different meetings going at one time. And then there'll be I'm trying to think of other things, but that pretty much covers a lot of it. And then there's lightning talks. Thank you. So just a ton of different ways where there's stuff that's on the conference. And I could also see it like if there is a BOF and there's additional discussion that's merited, then you could schedule some additional time, for that discussion, or some other topic that comes up. So hopefully that'll be, good opportunities for even furthering these discussions and ideas. And I also want to put a pitch in, like I said, it's a little afterward. I keep thinking about this idea of the Kickstarter, which is, we have all these projects. LEAP essentially was like a Kickstarter where there was money raised to do the lessons enhancement. The gradebook was like a Kickstarter where there was, a group that got together that all interested in improving the gradebook interface, and that got funded and is taking off. There's accessibility one called Rally, which you'll be hearing more about. So all these projects are bubbling up and are getting funding from consortiums of institutions with similar interests. So I just think that that's still also something that I've been thinking about and others have been thinking about in the community, and maybe we'll do something, have some discussion around that and how we can make it a little more systematic and easier for people to participate and, and see the path for being able to launch projects and find others with similar interests. So, I'm a couple minutes over. I'm wondering if anyone else has any final comments or questions. Oh, fire alarm, bye, Fawe, good luck. Any other final comments or questions from folks? I know we have to wrap up. I'm sure folks are going to have to go. Okay. Well, it looks like folks are going. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.